Ford Focus Mark 1s. Now, I have picked up quite a few pieces of information over the years. I mean, quite a few. I mean, I've probably picked up most of what you need to know about looking after a Mark 1 Focus and any pitfalls. There are some things I'm not aware about that I am learning, mostly related to the diesel models. But most of all, what are the areas, if you are a complete, virgin to Ford Focus Mark 1s, what are the most common symptoms that you can have, common problems that you can have that have happened throughout the years of Mark 1 Focuses, that have not just happened recently as they've aged, but problems that they've had from relatively new and young, and they've happened consistently in the forums down the years. And I asked myself, what are these problems? And I've narrowed them down to 20 problems. I mean, for a car that was mass produced in production for 7 years, quite frankly, you would expect more problems than the count of 20. I mean, there are, but these are the main ones that I'm going to point out to you that have been cropping up throughout the car's life. Many of the issues can be solved. Some of them are a little bit more tricky to solve, but hopefully this will point you in the right direction if you are you're not aware about the pitfalls of this car. Well, number one is rust. Number one, rust. These cars used to rust way before the so-called perforation paintwork warranty of 10 to 12 years, I believe. They may have extended it a bit to 12 after a few years, and quite a few of these cars would have gone back into warranty for all sorts of things, namely like paint bubbling at the end of the doors, at the bottom of the doors, on the edge, things like that. But as the cars age, we're seeing more and more rust issues because of basically lack of upkeep and lack of maintenance. And quite frankly, once the outer coatings have sort of been penetrated, the under seal is peeling off, and then water can get in, and then the rust gets worse and worse. But that's basically the biggest issue on Mark 1 Focuses. But if we ignore rust, because I've spoken about rust so many times, let's focus on another 20. So that is not included, I will say, in the top 20. Let's go to number 20. Okay, number 20. The radio does not tune. Now, these original radios are really good. It can actually work with the ignition off. You just have to push the button and we get the code. Sorry about that. It's been a while since I've driven this car and had to disconnect the battery. Lovely. Well done, Andrew. You've lost the code again. No, it's all right. I've got the code somewhere in here or somewhere there. That's where the locking key was. I shouldn't have kept it there. That's great. I'll keep that. Security. Basically, when you're trying to adjust this to find the actual radio station that you want, what you find is, well, not this actually, it's this. It's not. That's the volume switch, stupid Andrew. This can help you to seek the correct radio station. But what will happen is it will just keep cycling and cycling and cycling, and it won't lock on to any radio station. And that's when there's a little IC chip in this, and apparently you only have that chip in the CD player models. In the cassette models, you don't have that chip, so they don't actually suffer for as many problems. It's the CD players, the 6000 CD or the multi-changer CD, and I know the multi-changer can cause a problem, but this is a big issue, and a lot of people have junked their radios because of this, and I've had two in this car's life that I've done exactly that. Right, if you have the manual model, it might be quite a common thing where basically the gear lever won't go in reverse, or actually the gear lever pops off the ball joint at the base of the gear lever. Now, a lot of people just use wraps and wraps of cable ties to sort this issue, but really you need a new ball joint. It is replaceable as a separate item, bit of a faff, but that's okay. But the other one is gear change cables stretching. That is also a common fault that has happened throughout the years, and at relatively young and low mileages, strangely enough, you do need new cables, because your gear change will be sloppy and indirect, and precisely against everything a Mark 1 Focus is. Now, if you have a 1.8 2-litre Zetec petrol engine, you will have the thermostat housing, which is located kind of here. The coil pack is kind of in this sort of position here, and the thermostat housing is just here. And that thermostat housing is made of plastic, and it is prone to cracks, where you will just see coolant at the bottom up by all this gearbox ribbing down here. And that is the first classic sign that it is leaking some coolant, and you do need to change it. It is a common problem, and hence why this is definitely going on the list. I'd like to say, but the 1.4, 1.6 Sigma engine with its thermostat housing down here does not suffer from that kind of issue in any respect versus the thermostat on the 1.8 litre. It does happen, but that happens 10 times more. As we walk to the back here, we've covered this problem before. Corroded bulb holders in the rear fog lamp and the rear reversing light on that side. It is due to water ingress, because you've got the wheel here splashing water past the arch liner into this housing. It does get past the seal, you do get water in there, and over time it corrodes the actual lamp holder itself. Common MOT failure on the fog lamps. On the reverse light, it isn't a failure because it's not tested, because it's a pre-2009 car, but still it's an advisory. And look, I've got my notes to tell me that. Heated rear screens with all these lines. Every car suffers from this problem. Eventually you get some of the lines not working, where there's kind of a break in the orange wire. You can't really repair them without it actually showing up like a sore thumb. So really, honestly, when you get a broken line, just accept that it's broken, and otherwise get another tailgate. But really, honestly, it's one of those things. If the entire screen does not work, or any of the lines, that is a symptom of a bigger problem that I'm going to come to further down this list. Right, well, as I say, this is in no particular order, although I am kind of working towards the more severe and more common ones as we work through this list. But this isn't entirely an accurate one. It is open to debate and discussion at what level I've put all these items. But the next one on my list is the idle control valve, which is otherwise known as a stepper motor. It is a stepper motor. It moves in micro steps to close a little flap, and to allow some airflow during idle, but not too much. And at fast idle, this would open more to allow more air into the car during a fast idle warming up stage. But they often get choked up, and they can result in some really poor idle when the car is warmed up. And that is the major clue with these. And sometimes they can actually fail, very rarely though, but they can fail by literally the motor packing up and sticking shut. And if it sticks shut when you're trying to start the car, it won't start. Next one, power steering switch. Now, the power steering switch is prone to leaks, and it is a component that has been doing this over the years, really, to be honest with you. And it is not down to necessary age. It is possibly down to lack of changes. And I'm not joking. This is not a service item, but changing the fluid is needed. And if you don't know how to change the fluid, watch one of my Rover 45 how to change your power steering fluid. Exactly the same principle with this, and it's relatively simple, but that is just to preserve the O-ring, which has completely given up and burst. And when it bursts, it will just leak. Now, my power steering pump is down here because I don't have air conditioning, because this car is weird. Not many Mark 1s are this weird, but it's weird. Most of you will have an air compressor at the front and your power steering pump at the back, and you're going to have a look to see if your switch is weeping whatsoever. It shouldn't be. It should be nice and dry. But if it does, you need a new switch. You can't get the O-ring separately. I wouldn't really want to try my hand putting a generic one from a kit and trying to fit it, because often it's not exactly the right size, and that's what's required for this sort of job. Next on the list, breather pipe. Breather pipes on the 1.4, 1.6 Sigma are a common weak point. They are located right under here so that you can get your kids to work on your car for you. Ford was thinking about getting the young ones started early so that they could sell their next generation of shit boxes to the young ones. But quite frankly, this is a bit of a pain in the ass, because what happens is this is under so much pressure from the crankcase vapors that come through it, that there can be, if there's any weakness in this pipe, there'll be a hole, and that hole will cause an air leak, and your car will run like a dog. It will either try and cut out and stall, or the engine RPMs will go through the roof. Either one or two. I've had the bit where it tries to cut out on me, and being an automatic, I actually got away with it. I actually kept my foot on the gas and had my foot on the brake pedal at all times. So actually I had my foot on the gas kind of halfway, and the only thing stopping my car from moving was my foot on the brake. If you had a manual, you would have had to have called the AA. It's that much of an Achilles heel. It's a pain of a job, but once it's done, fit and forget. Get a genuine one, don't get aftermarket ones. Learn the lesson. I bought an aftermarket one years ago and it was rubbish, lasted 6 months. If you have a 1.82 litre Zetec petrol engine, you will be very familiar, potentially if you've owned it for more than 6 months, that there is a failure with the coolant pipe that runs across the front of the radiator. I'm going to show you a picture of that right here. That is the pipe we're talking about. It runs right down the front of the radiator at the top, and it is prone to bursting. And it is just not a fault of the plastic, because the genuine ones do this after a certain amount of time. The aftermarket ones probably don't fare any better. So genuine ones are probably the order of the day, or very high quality aftermarket. It's just one of these items that unfortunately you might have to change every time you change your coolant, which is presumably every 5 years. OAT coolant lasts for 5 years, and I would presume at every OAT coolant change you probably need to change this pipe for peace of mind, ideally. Something that plagues my car as much as any other Mark 1, whether it's a 3-door or 5-door on an estate or a saloon. Now, it's wanted to play ball today. Some days it doesn't want to do that. The central locking does have a mind of its own, and if I just come in here, and will it react? Oh, it has today. Oh, it has today. It's woken up today. Clearly it's been desperately waiting for me to come back, and it's wanted to act up and basically do as it's told. But unfortunately, central locking faults are very common. It is usually down to one thing. It is the driver's door actuator, which is the master module. It controls if that goes wrong, the whole central locking goes wrong. It can be sometimes down to the GM module down there by the ECU, but often it's a faulty module. The grease inside the modules, by the way, it gets a bit hard in the winter, so I suspect that is why you've got one door reacting and the other door not reacting. And again, it'd be even worse on the 5-door models. Unfortunately, I haven't got a plain solution to that, because I've yet to come across a solution that kind of wins all the way around. But all I will say is patience is a key to this, and just trying to find out a few ways and ask on the forums, because I know less of this than other people. I have not bothered to tackle this issue because it's intermittent in my car. But if I do lose a door, or if a door isn't reacting, then I'll go start looking at the modules. The modules can pack up, but very rarely. It is usually the master cylinder in the driver's door that causes a lot of the issues. Yeah, working today. Now, next one, rocker cover leaks. Now, whatever Mark 1 you have, whether it be a petrol or diesel, whatever engine, you will have rocker cover leaks at some point. The rocker cover gaskets are not brilliant. They do get hard and they get flat over time. Obviously, they get crushed when you initially install them, but they get hard in that position. And usually when you take the rocker cover off, maybe to do a timing belt or to whatever you need to take it off for, whether it's a cleaning or whatever, usually when you actually put it back on, it will then start leaking. because unfortunately the shape has kind of happened over the time. It's been flattened and it's gone hard in that position, and then it will start leaking. But sometimes it can just start leaking on its own because of age, and a rocker cover gasket is a bit of a pain of a job. You've got to kind of remove all this and remove the wiring. It's a bit of a faff, I have to say, on a Mark 1, but the truth is, it is what it is. It's not the end of the world, but it's just something that happens quite a lot. I will point out on the Sigma, because the engine is counted backwards and it's not flat like the Z-Tech, the oil is more likely going to not come at the front. It's not often you'll see this wet with oil. It usually goes into the spark plug wells, okay? And also it will go out the back of the engine, down the back, and probably onto this hot exhaust. You may smell some burning smoke. That's the advice I have for a lot of people that say, I can smell smoky oil, I can a burny oil smell. That's where I point them to. Some of these jobs I've never come across, and if I do come across them, then I will happily welcome them with open arms and deal with the problem and show you guys how to deal with it. And this is one problem I've not encountered. There's a few common faults here today that, cross fingers, I've never had to come across, but I'm very well aware that they can and possibly will happen at some point. And wiper arm ball joints, they are a problem on Mark 1s, and I've not had this problem. It is a common fault that basically the ball joints in the linkage, so you've got one linkage there and you've got basically another linkage going somewhere around here. You've got two linkages, and basically you've got a ball joint that connects the linkages to the actual wiper motor itself. Now those ball joints can wear over time naturally because it is a ball joint, and these wipers, they do put a bit of strain on the ball joints, and it is known for the ball joints to sort of wear so much that the actual linkages pop off. And when that happens, you may have one wiper working and one not. So usually it happens when it's raining at the worst possible time. And I'm afraid that's always the way, and it will probably leave you stranded waiting for the AA man. But the truth is, it is a repairable function. You just get the scuttle off, you break obviously the wiper arms off the spindles. That's the hardest part of that because they are often stuck on. There's a few techniques to try and get them off, and it's pretty simple when you've got a few techniques. Get the scuttle off, and then take the whole wiper motor with linkages out. And then there's a couple of things that you can use. I'll just point out to this repair kit, and it is basically a clamp that clamps on the ball joint, and it makes sure that it doesn't, basically the linkages can't pop off. So if you don't want to replace your linkages and save a bit of money, that's the kit I'd go for. But if you're like me and you just want it done a little bit more, less short term, I'm not suggesting that the clamp is short term, but I would just replace the linkages because they're available. I think they're about £25 a linkage. I just buy 2 new linkages, pop it back in, and know that the job is done, and I won't have to come back to it for a long time. Steering rack failures on any Mark 1. Okay, now the steering racks are very much similar steering racks throughout the range. I think the ST170 has a slightly different rack. In fact, I know it does. But really, honestly, all these racks, including the ST170 rack, they all suffer from the same thing, really. They can go. They can just, basically, the symptom is you're going around a corner and the steering goes a bit stiff, then it goes loose suddenly. That, I'm afraid, is a worn tooth on the pinion rack, and I'm afraid it's a replacement job. So it is quite a common fault. It's happened to many people. It could be the fact that the steering system has just been put under an enormous amount of pressure, or, and this is another thing, and this links to the power steering fluid again, change the power steering fluid, because that power steering fluid lubricates that rack as much as the pipe work and everything else, including the pump. So remember to change the fluid, because that fluid could be the difference between preserving your current rack and avoid having to pay somebody, most likely, if you can't do it yourself, to drop the entire subframe with the rack and then swap the rack over. Right pain in the ass, you don't want that. So give this a try, please. If your rack is in good condition, if it's not giving you any symptoms, then do this, because this is a big problem. Next one, biggie, window regulators, namely the driver's window. Big common fault is the driver's window regulator to pack up. It's always the driver's one because it's the one that's most used. Actually, I don't think that whatsoever. And I'm going to tell you a little story now. Most Mark 1s that I've seen have bad driver's window regulators. Very rarely has a passenger one given up unless there's an issue with the cable. Now usually it's the motors that pack up because the brushes have worn and they're not repairable, these motors. So it's basically a throwaway item. You can buy another motor, stick it on the cable, the actual regulator itself. It's a bit of a pain of a job because the cable has to twist around a spindle. It's a bit of a faff, to be honest with you. So usually you just buy the whole thing, the regulator with the cable system, because it's cables and not an actual gear wheel as other manufacturers use, much more cheaper as per Ford. And then you would basically have the motor with it. But I will tell you now, my driver's window has been changed about 7 years ago, and my passenger one is still the original. The back windows, I very rarely hear them failing. And the truth is, the aftermarket parts, it's very difficult to get a regulator for a passenger door unless it's from Ford. But there's plenty of them for the driver's door. So the aftermarket manufacturers seem to think the same. The passenger window regulators do not cause a problem. The back door window regulators on a 5-door and the estate and the saloon do not cause a problem. It's just the driver's door. There seems to be something that makes the regulators last nowhere near as much. And I'm not being funny. I've used that regulator has lasted 21 years, right? 21 years of use. Now that's not going to be as used as much as the driver's door. But the truth is, I am someone, because I don't have air conditioning, I have opened this window so many times over the years. And in fact, every time I drive, I crack the window. And yet it still works. 7 years after I replaced this one. So you would have thought after a few years after replacing this wouldn't be far behind. Well, it still works. But there's something I'm going to show you now. Yeah, it's a bit slow. Oh, dearie me. But the driver's one, the aftermarket one, oh, it's full of life. Much quicker, much quicker. Now, hatchback and estate model owners, please be aware. If you have multiple symptoms of your heated window not working on any of the lines, this isn't working, these number plate lights are not working, and your wiper's not working, or just one or two of them items, or even one of them, it could be this issue. And I think most of you know what I'm going to talk about. The loom that goes through here from the car, so it goes underneath that headlining in the car, up through here, and then in through here into the back of the tailgate, right? That is a problem. It is a problem that many people have encountered, and I will probably encounter it myself. I have a spare loom. That's my answer, because soldering it up is too much of a problem. But because of the opening and closing of the tailgate over many years, and these wires do go brittle in the cold, they do snap, and you do get these sort of symptoms. Now, I did check the wiring ages ago, and I'm pretty happy with the condition of them. But again, it might be a problem that I face suddenly one day, and that is going to be some lovely content for you guys. But it is just something to be very, very aware about. Now, one of the other problems on a Mark 1 Focus, as you can potentially see on that side, is the drop links. Oh yes, boy, these drop links, Mark 1s eat these drop links. Please make sure you get quality ones like this one from Lem Forder, or a genuine Ford one. I wouldn't recommend aftermarket ones because they're not going to last that long. Some do, some don't. It's a bit of a guesswork. But Mark 1s do like going through these drop links, and you will notice it will be crashing and banging at the front. It will sound like a big massive ball joint. Trust me, it's not often these ball joints here, it's these. Yep, just checking that this one is still attached. Now, the next one is wheel bearings. Now, Mark 1s, like many Fords of this age, do tend to go through the odd bearing or two. The rear bearings, if you have drum brake models, they are built into the drums. I would just recommend, if you've got a wheel bearing, just get a new drum. It's just far easier than just getting one pressed out, because that will be a garage job for most people, including myself at the moment. I don't have a press at the moment. The front ones can be a pain. They need to be pressed out, so you need to take the whole swivel pillar, so you sort of everything that pivots off. Sometimes people call it the hub. It's not really, it's a swivel pillar. Everything attaches to it, the strut, the track rod ends, everything. So basically you need to detach everything off it, take it away, take it to a garage, and they'll press a new bearing for you. It's not the hardest job in the world, but all the same, it is something to be aware about. If you get a rumbling sound, you need to listen to where it's coming from, because it could either be at the front or it could be at the back. I'm just quite impressed with the actual amount of turn I get in that wheel. I put it on full lock. That's pretty impressive, that. Number 4, instrument cluster faults. Pretty common. You'll kind of see all the needles doing some funny things, and there'll be some Pac-Man stuff, Pac-Man impressions going on here with dashes and all sorts of weird shapes. Now, sometimes it can be damp. It could be a bad soldered joint at the back. It's a very well-known problem. You can get it repaired for about something like 65 quid, which is quite reasonable these days, really, for a repair job, and they'll go over the whole thing and test the whole cluster for you, and you don't lose your mileage. But it's quite common for Focus Mark 1s to have a cluster from another car reading the wrong mileage, because people have done this throughout the years with no hesitation, really. But the truth is, it could also be a bad earth, and I'd say again, clean your earth points in the engine bay, because quite frankly, this could be a fault. There's a couple of earth points down there, and there's a couple of earth points where my finger is down there. Clean them, and you might just find that this is a solvable issue for you. Actually, that wasn't number 4. If you'd have worked out the numbers, actually that was number 3 I was actually talking about. So that's instrument cluster faults for you. Very easily repaired, but it can be a bit of a faff. But now we're down to number 2. And I have done a video about this, and it is coil packs. Coil pack failures. They have plagued Mark 1s on the petrol models since the car was in first gestation. Coil pack failures was such a problem that Ford decided to tell the owners that instead of the 1.3mm spark plug gap, they reduced it to 1mm to reduce the pressure on the coil pack, because therefore the demand on the coil pack is a bit less. Then obviously, because if the gap is smaller, it's demanding less electricity from that coil pack, so kind of averting some of the early failures. But nowadays, if you have aftermarket coil packs and decent Bosch ones, the Bosch one, by the way, that I've shown you, go to that video please. It's a great video if you want to know everything you need to know on coil packs. The Bosch one, which is basically what they made for Ford, it's got the same design and parts number, and it is the uprated one. It looks like this. It's got the longer bolts on it, okay, much longer bolts, and then your problem sorted. You can up the gap to 1.3. I'm running on 1.2mm. The only reason that I think it's quite beneficial, I don't necessarily think you'll find any performance benefits, but I do suspect that your emissions will be far greater. Therefore, if you've got a bigger spark, you've got a fatter burn, better for emissions. And certainly with Mark 1s getting past the MOT, it is a bit of a problem. Those of you who are into Mark 1s will probably may have guessed what I have missed, but some of you may not have. So let's revisit the biggest issue that I've seen on a Mark 1 since I've owned this car, 10 years. And it's a common problem that comes up time and time again. I have done a video on this, and I'm going to reiterate why it's so important to keep on top of this. And no. It is not rust. No. As I say, we're not going to discuss rust in this video, because how many videos have I done about rust on a Mark 1? The biggest problem on a Mark 1 is this. It is the pollen filter scuttle seal that runs all the way along here. What happens to this seal is primarily it is designed to keep water out of this part of the scuttle. This is why this part of the scuttle has no holes, and yet this side has got holes, because the pollen filter lives under here in a housing. Okay, that is where your air goes through into the cabin, and it diverts water. This seal diverts water away from this side, down that side, or down to the drain on that side. So the water does not go anywhere near that housing. But what happens when that seal deteriorates? Water goes in through that filter. It goes through the filter, saturates the filter, so the filter's ruined. And pollen filters are not exactly dead cheap. They're not the most expensive things, but you know, it's 15 quid around that, isn't it? And then what happens is it goes down into the motor. And it goes down into the motor, water, electric's not good. And then the motor spindle, over a period of time, because it rusts because of the water, it seizes, it gets stiff. And you might find one day when you turn your heater blower to number 1 or 2, as most of us usually do with a Mark 1, it doesn't work. Or in fact, it doesn't work, the motor packs up, and then it blows the heater resistor because it puts such a strain on the heater resistor. Now, a little lesson here, obviously the heater resistor, this is part of this common fault. The heater resistor pack is such a common fault on these cars. It is up there. And the reason that I've included it as the number 1 issue with this scuttle seal that we have along here is because it's the same issue. Usually these heater resistors fail because the motor is getting stiff and it's not turning freely on its bearings because it's rusted on its side. So therefore it's blowing the heater resistor, and then the only way of... Sometimes you can operate the heating on number 4. Number 4 bypasses the resistor. So if the heater resistor is packed up, it won't work on 1, 2 and 3, it will work on 4. That means the heater resistor is blown. But if it works on 4, then your heater fan is just about okay. It's salvageable, but you need to deal with the problem. New heater resistor pack, get the motor out, dry it out, and pray to God you haven't done too much damage. New filter, and get a new seal. All that damage because someone decided, oh, it's only a seal, it's not important. It bloody well is. It's the most important thing, I would say, on a Mark 1 in terms of damage limitation, because the costs can stack up. I mean, you take the cost of a decent resistor pack, £10. A new fan motor, £50. I mean, we're not going second hand here. We're getting aftermarket stuff, brand new, whatever. We're talking about 40 to 50 quid. Let's say 40. So that's £50 altogether. Filter, 65. The scuttle seal is a £15 part. Now, you have to look on eBay to find it. I'll try and get a full parts number up. But the truth is, any silicone seal will actually work. So if you've got your old seal, but it's leaking, it's letting water past, it's not in the greatest of states, mine is okay. What I would do is put a bit of silicone on the seal before you push this scuttle down. And by the way, these scuttle panels are rubbish. They are rubbish. And a lot of people have got new ones. I feel like getting a brand new one because, well, to be honest with you, these clips are broken here on the actual bulkhead, not the scuttle, but the side bits are missing because they break off. They're rubberized and they break off, and I've thrown mine in the bin. It's supposed to stop leaves getting in there, but it's really not a problem because I basically blast my drain holes every so often with air and water anyway. But I say this side is exactly the same. It's rubbish. The scuttle is the worst part on a Mark 1 Focus. They didn't get it right. They just made it cheap, and they could have done it far better, and this is a problem. Retrospectively, is that all? Yes. Some of these problems can be averted. Some of them are just inevitable, but this is really all you really have to watch out for on a Mark 1. And again, I must just say, ignore the rust. These are problems that exist and have constantly existed throughout Mark 1 production and life. And they've got to an age now where they are old cars. They are really old. And I think people forget that by looking at them because they still look fresh. They look modern. They look cutting edge. Massive testament to the design of the car. that people can just look at this and not glance twice. And even today, when the numbers of these are so low, the general perception that I've had, especially at a few car shows, I will disappointingly say, is, what's that doing here? And it really is like, this is what I'm trying to achieve with the Full Focus Mark 1 Preservation Group, amongst a load of dedicated admins for that group. We are trying to push on and promote this car as a modern classic, because it is, but I don't quite think the world of cars and the car community has accepted that at the moment. And it is a testament to this car's massive futuristic design, exterior wise, and how it drives. And quite frankly, nothing has really compared to it since. I don't think any Ford has compared to it since. Maybe the Mark 7 Fiesta in the UK, or known as a Mark 6 in Europe. That car kind of was close. I think it's very close in terms of how it feels and drives. And I think that's why people love them Fiestas. And it's such a shame that from now on, there won't be any Fiestas or Focuses. And I hope you enjoyed this little rambling of a video, but I thought I would actually make something like this, because there are a lot of problems with potentially an older car like this, but 20 problems? I could have gone on a little bit more, but then we're going into the realms of smaller problems and not problems that have existed constantly. And every day, almost every week, someone is complaining on the Facebook groups of, I've got this problem, and it's one of the 20 I've just pointed out. That's exactly what this video is about. I hope you enjoyed this, guys, and I will see you in another episode. You take care.